Hello, I'm Stephan Bonnar, and welcome to the final round, joined, as always, by One Kick Nick Blomgren and Matthew Holtz. And we're going to dive right into UFC 212. But first, some MMA news. You got the odds up for Cormier Bones Jones, and Bones Jones, minus 255 favorite. Does that surprise you?
No, a little bit. So when I was thinking about around minus 200 on John Jones, and then the market got a little bit ahead of me on this one, and a lot of other books opened at like minus 280 to minus 300 range. So I went well below market at minus 240, and right away we took bets on John Jones. We had to go to 255. So the consensus seems to be still that, look, John Jones easily won the first one, albeit a significant amount of time has passed since then, and we don't really know what kind of shape John Jones is in. But the bettors seem to believe that this is still the same John Jones we've seen.
Yeah, I like Jones in this fight if it were a pick'em, but that kind of odds, I think Cormier, there's a little value there.
Well, shouldn't you have some odds to see if he tests dirty for the fight?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, yes, because the out of competition tests, they're going to do at least
they're going to be nailing him.
At least 5 of those out of competition, and I mean, what are the chances he doesn't do any partying before that fight?
Probably not good, but I mean, his issues haven't always been testing either. Some of them, some of the drug issues came up because of the hit and run and the drugs in the car, and I mean, he did admit to doing coke all weekend, like he said before he whipped Cormier the first time. Even well, I think his exact words are, "I whipped you on coke" or something.
Yes, because he did that fight. He did test positive for cocaine in a out of competition test about a month out of the fight.
Yeah, so
and he still won, which is very impressive.
Yeah, got to put the odds up.
And you also got Yoel Romero versus Robert Whittaker title eliminator fight up there. And right now, Yoel's slight favorite at minus 140.
Look, these guys almost replicate each other. I tried to get a comparable number in the market because, I was going back and forth making this number, and I didn't see one single book in the world really that had it up. So I said, look, I'm just going to have to go with my number. But when you look at their resumes, they both have a lot of the same big wins, right? I mean, they both beat Jacare for their big signature win, and Romero did beat Weidman. But when I looked back, Romero was an underdog to Weidman, underdog to Jacare, underdog to Brunson. He's an underdog in all these big fights. So then I looked at Whittaker, underdog to Brunson, underdog to Jacare, and they both beat them all. So at the end of the day, it was a really tough price to make. I think Romero's the more popular, the more established guy. Everyone's been calling him the real number one contender. But when you look at Robert Whittaker, only 26 years old, and that win streak he's on, awful impressive. This one's probably close to a pick'em.
Yeah, I got to say, just in pure hands, I give an advantage to Whittaker. And pure boxing skills.
Romero's his judo and his wrestling's really good too. So
yeah, so is Jacare's.
He does get tired.
True,
and he does get tired.
Yeah, Yoel has gotten tired in the past, but he didn't. His last fight against Weidman, that went in the 3rd round.
And then the knee.
And his cardio looked good.
Yeah,
considering Weidman was setting a pretty good pace.
And he was losing to Derek Brunson. He had to come back and win that fight. It's been probably 5 fights in between for Romero. People forget it.
And the Jacare fight was really close.
Yes. Yeah.
And let's not forget Tim Kennedy. He kind of was knocked out at the end of that round.
Did that weird, didn't want to get off the stool and then come out and get him.
Yes, it reminded me Angelo Dundee when Ali fought Henry Cooper, pulling the stitching out of his glove just to give him a little time because he was so hurt at the end of that round. Right, but the big news is UFC 212 coming on up. This is a pretty good card, Matt, and it's in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And, of course, they got some hometown heroes on the card, most notably the title fight between Max Holloway and Jose Aldo. Never bury your lead. Let's start with Holloway versus Aldo, and right now, Jose Aldo, slight favorite, minus 145.
Yeah, and look, this whole card from top to bottom doesn't necessarily feel like a pay-per-view card, but this fight in particular is one that diehard MMA fans have waited for so long and are so excited about it that this feels like a big card, mostly because of this fight. And this one's been really great two-way action, and this is what makes fights great. When you can make a strong case for both guys, this is a fight we opened at Aldo minus 135, swung all the way to Max Holloway minus 115 at one point, and then a big wave of Aldo money this week has Aldo all the way back as a 140 favorite. But I've heard a lot of really smart MMA guys making really strong cases for both fighters.
Yeah, that's how I felt. This one, to me, was kind of a pick-em. I was leaning towards Holloway at first, then Aldo, and just the way I see it. Holloway, better gas tank, right? I think that's his biggest strength. And also, he fights pretty good southpaw. Expect to see Max Holloway coming out southpaw for this fight. The last time Jose Aldo saw southpaw, it was Conor McGregor, and he got knocked out. So maybe that's in the back of his head.
I don't know if you remember seeing him, but
Aldo, the stronger guy. Also, Kenny Florian did pretty good with Aldo, and he fought him southpaw. So I think Aldo would rather fight a right-handed fighter. Mm-hmm. And I notice Holloway likes to fight whatever his opponent isn't. So if he's fighting a southpaw, he fights right. If he's fighting a southpaw, or if he's fighting a righty, he goes southpaw a lot. So I think we're going to see Holloway go southpaw. I give the speed and strength advantage to Aldo, wrestling advantage to Aldo. But like I said, the big advantage in the 5-round fight, Holloway, if he could push that pace for 5 rounds, fight him from the southpaw position, this could be an interesting night.
And I think Holloway's the bigger finisher here. Like, he goes for the finish. I was looking at some stats I had on Jose Aldo.
He likes sitting on a lead.
6 of his last 8 wins are by 6 of his 8 wins in the UFC. He's 8-1 in the UFC, Jose Aldo. 6 of those 8 wins are by decision. And this is a guy in his WEC days that was known as a big finisher, as a big puncher. To your point, he sits on those leads in the UFC. And a guy like Max Holloway is not going to allow you to do that because he is going to be coming late regardless of whether he's down 3-1 or up 3-1. So it's a really interesting test.
It is. And that speed advantage, I think it's got to go to Aldo. I went back and watched Holloway versus Conor McGregor, and Conor just had a significant speed advantage. And I think that Aldo and Conor's speed's a little more comparable. So I do expect Aldo to have that speed advantage. But if Holloway pushes the pace, then that speed advantage could even itself out as Aldo fatigues later in the fight.
One thing I think I've learned in MMA, and you both could probably speak to it better than I can, having actually been in the sport so long, is that you see a big jump with guys. When Aldo fought McGregor, he was 21 years old. Rarely do you see a 20 or 21-year-old in MMA. Yeah, Max was. Yeah, Max was 21 when he fought McGregor and lost to McGregor, and that's the last time he lost. But rarely do you see fighters reach their peak at 20 or 21. In boxing, these guys can do it a little easier. In MMA, you just don't see it. You may not be physically ready for all the different diverse skill sets you're going to see. And you see that jump a lot of times, I hear, from 20 to 23 to 24, getting that 15th to 18th fight, you make big improvements. And Max Holloway feels like one of those guys, now still only 25 years old, 4 years later after the McGregor loss, who might have made those big improvements.
That's a good point.
Yep.
So this one, like I said, pick 'em. I personally, when I go back and forth in my head, I don't have too much conviction on either fighter, especially when the odds aren't too slanted in one direction. I tend to sit back, but you guys are going to share your bets.
Well, I'm going to go with Jose Aldo just because it's in Brazil. And if it goes to decision, when you're in Brazil,
there's
You
a
have
chance
to factor
you
that
get the
in.
nod.
I think that's a real point, Nick.
yeah, you have to think, how many bad decisions have you seen in Brazil?
That's true. That's a good point.
When I first saw this fight announced, my initial feeling was TJ Dillashaw, Renan Barão won. Renan Barão at the time was known as the best technical striker at 135, and I went, boy, I could see Holloway doing to Aldo what TJ did to Renan Barão in that fight. And then the more I watched it, I felt like The biggest, most important factor in this fight for me is going to be those Jose Aldo leg kicks early. Because if he starts landing those leg kicks, and he has the best leg kicks at featherweight early, and slows down Holloway, his technical striking and his footwork is good enough for him to just start using his footwork, boom, boom, combinations in and out, and he could outpoint Holloway.
That's a good point. I think he in this fight is going to be slowing down Max Holloway early, and I think you do that with leg kicks and also with wrestling. Although you don't agree and think we'll see Jose Aldo initiating some offensive wrestling, we all know how good his defensive wrestling is. But I think we might see him try to slow Holloway down just by getting a takedown here and there and making him slow down because Aldo's so explosive, powerful, and fast. That fast twitch that he does fight in spurts a little bit more. And I could see if Holloway tries to push the pace on Aldo, Aldo's going to get uncomfortable and look for ways to slow him down. A, by those low kicks that Matt mentioned, and B, by getting a takedown if it's there.
Yeah.
And maybe the reason that we haven't seen Aldo's wrestling as much all the time is he fought so many wrestlers, Chad Mendez twice, Ricardo Lamas, Uriah Faber, that he didn't want to wrestle those guys. So we didn't see Aldo wrestle, but to your point, when he has used it, it's definitely been effective.
Yeah. And he is strong as hell for that weight. So moving on down the card.
Who did you pick?
I'm not going to bet the fight. I'm only betting 3 fights straight, but I am going to use Max Holloway in a parlay, and it's strictly as a fanboy situation because he's the underdog, and I'm just so impressed with the leaps he's made from a 21-year-old who lost to Conor to 10 fights later, a 10-fight win streak.
And Mr. Bonnar, are you?
Yeah, I'm not touching that one.
You're not touching this one? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a toss-up. I make an argument for either guy, and when I do that, I tend to save my money.
Instead of flipping coins.
So, but moving on down the card, I'll tell you where there is some value. You got Carolina Kowalkiewicz. Gosh,
that's really good.
Fighting Claudia Gaudella, and Claudia Gaudella is a 3-1 favorite in this fight. If it were a pick'em, I'd probably choose Claudia because of her. I think she's physically the stronger fighter and has a wrestling advantage. But Carolina has better hands, and at a 3-1 underdog, I think there's some value, and maybe even taking her straight up, but especially into putting her in a parlay.
Yeah, and I think the one problem with the women's strawweight division is it's not really deep yet, right? It's not mature and it's not fully developed. And when I look at the rest of Claudia Gaudella's resume, I'm like, oh, who? Yeah, she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk in 2 really close fights. She lost both of them. I think she clearly lost the second fight. I mean, in the second fight, I thought she clearly won rounds 1 and 2 and lost 3, 4, and 5.
And that's the thing. Remember, this is a 3-round fight. If it were a 5-rounder, I'd really like Carolina in this fight, and I'd probably up my bet on her. But I think there's still some value. But Claudia tends to fatigue and gas out because she's stronger and she uses her wrestling a lot. So in a 3-round fight, that's going to favor Claudia. And we saw that the Joanna fight last time, 4th and 5th round, she was fatigued.
Yeah. The one place where we have seen a lot of action on this fight, and for good reason, has been on the over. We opened this thing at 2.5 rounds in a 3-round fight, over minus 300, and we still took a 30K bet to make 10K on the over, which made me take another peek at these girls. Coincidentally, every single one of both of these women's fights in the UFC have gone the distance, win or lose.
So, yeah, if you're betting over in this fight, that's a smart bet. And not just coming from my mouth, from this guy's mouth. And I mean,
it's a heavy price at this point, so... Yeah, so I guess you have to think who's going to win a decision, because basically both women have gone to decision every single fight, so we have to imagine that's going to happen. To Nick's point, we have to fight the Brazilian judging, which is going to be in Claudia's favor, which gives her a little bit of an edge there, and she's a fast starter in a 3-round fight. I want to take Carolina, but I'm a little bit scared even at the big plus price.
Yeah, I think there's some value there, and man, we'll just see how good her wrestling is. If she could keep, she could stuff that first or second takedown of Claudia's, she'll have a huge mental advantage that may be able to carry some work over for her to find openings with her hands. You see that a lot when wrestlers can't get the takedown. Their game plan kind of crumbles and they leave themselves a little vulnerable. So my heart's with Carolina in this fight. Personally, I'm a fan of hers. I like her, and my money's going to be too. I'm going to work her into a parlay. Nick?
I'm just going to work the over on a parlay.
Oh, and yeah, work
I mean, I like
That's
Carolina,
smart.
but but just do the parlay on the over.
Yeah, that's kind of a slam dunk.
I mean, Matt said they both have never been knocked out. They've never been submitted. They've always
all
went to the
UFC
decision.
fights go the distance.
So thanks for that
Sure, no problem.
point.
Very
But I'm
good
not
point.
putting 30 grand.
You know, the one interesting note in this fight, if you just look at the two and they're both so similar, their only losses are Joanna or Jacek. If you say who has the best win of their career of the two, it's certainly Carolina and her win over Rose Namajunas.
Yeah, and that was a good fight. She really put it on her. And Carolina, too, I think had Joanna a little more hurt than Claudia did. She really hit her flush with the right hand. I still can't believe Joanna recovered from that and was able to fight the way she did and come out on top. But some value here. I mean, going over 2.5, you could almost bank on, and at a 3-1 dog for Carolina, working her in the parlay, there's some value there. So,
and the one thing I like about Carolina too is she looks mean in there. Like, she's not going in to hug or be friends. I remember Ronda Rousey when she first came in. She wasn't shaking hands and being friends. She got herself pumped up, and she was mean. She wanted to hurt you. Carolina has that look on her. She's like, all right, save your cookies and pies, and I want to punch you in the face. She has that attitude about her. You got to like it. If she can stuff the takedowns, I think she's really live.
And believe me, Claudia went to trade at Jackson's. I'm sure that's a big part of their game plan.
Yeah.
Getting those takedowns, realizing it's a 3-rounder, and trying to get the nod in Brazil.
Yeah.
Moving down the card, two old men fighting each other. Old man's division. Vitor asks for it, and he gets it. We have Vitor Belfort fighting Nate the Great Marquardt. And Vitor, minus 150 favorite, and I like him in this fight because Nate has had trouble with punchers. I mean, if you look at their records, you had an interesting stat up that both of their both Vitor and Nate's last 4 losses have all been by knockout. But if you look at the difference, Vitor's knockouts have been more the TKO route, where he gets taken down and ground and pounded. You saw that happen with like Jacare, with Weidman, with Gastelum, and with Musashi in the last fight. And the difference is Nate Marquardt's losses have been knockouts, where he gets hit hard and goes to sleep. And let's not forget, Vitor packs that power. I mean, he was able to knock out Dan Henderson not once but twice in the first round. So believe me, if he tags Nate, he's going to put him to sleep.
This fight right here is the first of my 3 straight bets on this card, and I actually bet the total over on this card. And I know, and look, there's some really bad stats against this card. Like, Vitor Belfort has not been involved in a fight that went the distance since 2007. That's 10 years since he's actually been in a fight that went to the judges' scorecards. But I just feel like this is Vitor's last fight in the UFC. We all know that. He announced it. He wants to continue fighting, but no longer in the UFC, because he doesn't want to be fed these top 5 guys anymore. He's 40 years old. He wants to fight guys at his level that are, in that 38 to 45 range, and that still want to fight. Bellator, that's right. Perfect place for Vitor. I don't know. I don't think Vitor is getting knocked out here, and I wouldn't be surprised. How many times have we seen these big punchers like the Kimbo Slice fighter, when you mix these veterans in there that used to be big punchers, and all of a sudden you don't get a slugfest, really, because they're not both 22 anymore and all fire and vinegar. And I just have a feeling there's a possibility that this one gets at least maybe halfway through the second round, and at 1.5 rounds, that's all I need. Look, Vitor went almost through 2 full rounds with Gegard Mousasi. He can't make it 2 rounds with Nate the Great Marquardt. I think, look, these guys will probably come out. They're going to bang a little bit if Nate doesn't go to sleep in the first round, because I do think at some point in the first round, Vitor is going to land a big shot.
Yes.
If Nate takes it, there's a very good chance we get at least get into the third.
Yeah.
I like the odds on the over as well. 1.5
At a big
rounds,
plus.
You know, and how hungry is Vitor at this point?
Yeah, he's I don't know about hungry is, but he's always dangerous. Even an old guy, old guys still keep their.
But you
punching
notice since he hasn't had the TRT, he hasn't been that dangerous.
That's true.
Yeah. Has he had any knockouts since they removed the TRT?
Dan Henderson.
Yes.
But that's the only one. I mean, after the TRT, the first fight was Weidman. You could see the size difference, and he caught Weidman clean 2 or 3 times in that first round. And as we've seen, Weidman doesn't take punches amazingly well. Weidman didn't go anywhere. He just took him down and pounded him out.
Yeah.
Well,
Jacare didn't go anywhere.
When you're not on the Superman juice, you
he
just
caught
don't have any
Gastelum
Superman
early
left.
with a couple.
So Nate Marquardt, like I said, when he got KO'd, guys like Ellenberger, Lombard, it was like a one-and-done type of knockout, and that's what Vitor's good at. These guys really like the over in this fight. There's some value in it, and I just like Vitor straight up in this fight. I think he's going to beat Nate at minus 150. It's not the best deal, but it could be worse. And do you expect to see this line move by Saturday?
Well, historically, Vitor Belfort was
That's a
always
bigger
one
name.
of the most popular guys with bettors. But now at this point, I'm not quite sure. And because, unfortunately for Vitor compared to Nate, Vitor's been, his last 7 fights have all been big names. So, and you see him on these big pay-per-view cards in co-main spots and on the main card, and he's getting blasted in these pay-per-view big fight spots. Now people remember that, and after a while they're like, yeah.
That's actually what I'm hoping on.
And that could happen,
Seen him
sure.
getting his ass kicked
Yep.
lately. That
Very
they're gonna
well
beat
could be
Nate-
the case.
bet Nate. But then again,
I can tell you the line's dropped 10 cents already. It was 160, it's down to 150.
all right.
Just wait
It's
one
good
more
news
day.
for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I totally hear your argument about going over a round and a half. But I mean, I think if Vitor is going to win this fight, it's probably going to be an under a round and a half.
Let me ask you this, because this would affect my bet if I could have this information. Obviously, the only reason I'm betting in the over is, one, because it's plus 170, but B, also because I'm assuming that even though the fight's in Brazil, Vitor is still not going to be able to do any of the things that Vitor used to be able to do in Brazil. But he's not fighting in the UFC ever again after this. It's in Brazil, so who's really going to be testing him? I wonder about the testing issues at this fight, and this is one of the few bets where I tell people just to hold off a second, watch the weigh-in, see what Vitor looks like at
That's
the
a great
weigh-in,
point.
because it'll be very evident at the weigh-in.
We'll call that the Chael versus Tito syndrome.
Yes.
I was all about Chael till I saw the weigh-in. He looked like deflated, like someone let the
Yeah.
air out of his muscles. And if we see that Vitor,
Yeah.
then I might have to flip and go over a round and a half, because I don't think Nate's knocking Vitor out in the first round.
I agree.
If anyone's getting knocked out in the first round, I think it's going to be Nate. But yes, great point. Let's see how Vitor looks at weigh-ins. Woo! I'm really looking forward to that one. Moving down the card, we got Aluwali Bambosha versus Paulo Henrique Costa, a.k.a. they call him Borrachinha. And Borrachinha 9-0. He's never even heard the bell for his second round. All first-round knockouts. And this Aluwali Bambosha, I think I'm saying that right, he's coming off a decision loss to Cesar Ferreira. And his other fight in the UFC, he got TKO'd by Uriah Hall via ground and pound. It wasn't even standing up. And he's 1-2 overall in the UFC, but a lot of people are betting this guy. He's a New York guy. What are they seeing in him, and why are they betting him?
Well, I think we heard this story last week, right? Hey, a 9-0 guy who's never been out of the first round, but never fought anybody against a guy with a little bit of experience who's been in there with some guys. The difference here is Bambosha isn't Akhmedov. He wasn't in there with the likes of Gunnar Nelson and some real guys. And these two actually replicate each other here. All of Bambosha's wins are by knockout too, so they both are kind of the same. Go out there and bang it out real quick kind of guys. I think there's too many questions with, Paulo Henrique Costa here. The only thing I would say is last week, we were a little further down on the card with our other undefeated friend than we are. I have a feeling that they might be pushing Costa a little more since this is a pay-per-view card and he's the third fight down. Either he's a little more legit, or B, the UFC's giving him a little bigger push and has a little more confidence of where he's at.
And when you see this 9-0, most of his fights have ended not just in the first round, but in the first 2 minutes of the first round. There's that question mark there as how's his cardio? Is he going to gas out? But when I watch some of his fights, he's fighting at was this 185 pounds?
185, yeah.
Looks could be deceiving, but he looks fit. Looks like his cardio is not going to be a problem. I worry about mainly when you get those undefeated guys who never been on the first round at heavyweight. Those guys usually have the biggest chance of gassing out in the fight. So if you're gonna pick Bambosha because you think Costa might gas out, I don't think that's a good idea. He's a Bambosha 2.5-1 underdog in this fight, and I like Costa, or as they call him, Borrachina in this fight. But at this price, I don't think I'm gonna touch it.
Yeah, I'm staying away. Too many unknowns.
I'm staying away from that fight. It's tough when you got a guy that's winning fights in 2 minutes and then you got a round and a half to go.
All right, put it this way, guys. There's more value to be found on the card. Although we could probably pick the winner in this fight, it's not worth putting down $100 to make 30. So there's a couple more fights here that I think have a little more value to them. Speaking of, our next fight on the card, Yancy Medeiros versus Eric Silva, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Eric Silva plus 120 underdog. What is going on here?
And this is a fight that actually opened with Eric Silva, a small favorite, and we have taken nothing but Yancy Medeiros action. I originally wanted to bet Eric Silva myself, and I just couldn't figure out what's going on. What am I missing that some really smart MMA people are betting Yancy Medeiros? The more I looked, the more I couldn't find it. I don't know a lot, and it's mostly been detrimental stuff too. And this is what always concerns me when people do the wrong analysis. I don't like Eric Silva. He's failed every time he's stepped up. Yancy Medeiros is 0-5 against ranked opponents. I mean, what do you like there? He's never beaten a ranked opponent. I'm not sure there's a lot there to like with Yancy Medeiros. You have to love the level of competition with Eric Silva. A split decision, super tight loss to Neil Magny.
Yes.
He's coming off a rear naked choke win in his last one. Could have beat Magny in that fight. I mean, he fought Matt Brown when Matt Brown was like number 3 and 4 in the world. One of his losses should have actually been a win. He was knocking that guy out, hit him in the back of the head and got DQ'd. They threw him in with John Fitch a little too early when he wasn't quite prepared, and John Fitch out-wrestled him. Haven't we seen that story a million times? I mean,
yeah,
and broke him down.
Yeah.
So what Matt's trying to say here, guys, is that bet Eric Silva. This is a steal here. Getting Eric Silva at plus 120. Yancy Medeiros is a 55er. He's coming up in weight class, and it's not like he's a huge, big, strong 155er. He's kind of a skinny, fat 155er. Has a skinny neck, not the greatest chin. He gets his head turned a lot when he gets hurt. He gets hurt. He's slower. He throws looping punches. He doesn't even fight behind his jab well for being a tall guy. So Eric Silva literally has everything going in this fight. I was looking at this expecting to see, okay, Eric Silva is going to be a 2-1, a 3-1 favorite in this fight, and he's a slight dog. So if you want to make some money, this is one of the biggest steals on the card. Bet Eric Silva.
Look at Yancy Medeiros fought 4 guys that have ever been ranked in the UFC: Dustin Poirier, Jim Miller, Ruslan Khabilov, and Francisco Trinaldo. He lost all of them, got finished in 3.
And those were all 55ers.
At 55, yes.
Yeah. Well, you got to take Eric Silva on this. I mean,
is he going in
value
your
alone.
parlay, Nick, or is he going to be a straight up bet?
I don't know. I'm thinking it might be the first time I ever put a straight up bet.
Nice. I think I might do a little of both, just because this is
Maybe a
such
straight up bet
steal.
and put him on a parlay.
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm thinking. I agree with you, Nick. This is a steal, some value here. Bet Eric Silva. If I'm wrong, then just let me hear about it. But I'm sure you will. All right, next up, crafty veteran, we have Rafael Asuncao fighting Marlon Moraes, and Asuncao is a plus 150 underdog. What's going on here?
And this is the second of my straight bets. I already bet $100 on Rafael Asuncao at plus 160 already, 100 to make 160. And just like you thought Eric Silva was the steal of the fight, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw this line come out at some places. Look, Marlon Moraes has never fought in the UFC ever, and it's not like Rafael Asuncao. I mean, I can't believe they're giving your UFC debut against Rafael Asuncao. This is a guy who's 8-2 in the UFC, and this is his list of wins. TJ Dillashaw, former bantamweight champion of the world, Aljamain Sterling, Brian Caraway. I mean, the list goes on. He has beaten some of the best guys in the world. His only losses are the rematch against TJ Dillashaw, and Asuncao is coming off an injury in that one, and his first ever UFC
Uriah
fight
Faber.
against... No, his first ever
Oh, that was
UFC fight
WEC.
against Eric Koch. That was WEC.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, he got KO'd by Eric Koch.
I mean, this guy's really good everywhere, Asuncao. He's not a huge puncher. He's not a huge finisher, but he's really, really good ever. The fact that you beat TJ Dillashaw, not in a fluke, not some one-punch fluke or caught him in a choke, in a decision fight. You outworked and, beat TJ Dillashaw.
TJ in a decision.
Beat
and then
Aljamain Sterling.
They fought again, and TJ was able to beat Asuncao in a decision, and, I mean, it was a close fight.
Yeah.
So, and TJ did his homework, came prepared, had improved a lot, and squeaked out a decision. So, yeah, you're right. Rafael Asuncao, very talented fighter. I was surprised to see him at a plus 150 underdog, but Marlon Moraes, people are loving on this guy. He's coming over from the World Series of Fighting. He's riding a 13-fight win streak, and 7 of those have been title fights.
And you know what I've noticed here, and I can't believe that this is happening, but the big three from WSOF who all joined UFC recently as WSOF went through an ownership change, Branch, Justin Gaethje, and Marlon Moraes, they're all getting betting action. They were betting Branch in his fight. He won. We thought it was a good value as well. Yeah. But they're betting Moraes, and everyone keeps asking me, when are you putting odds up on Gaethje Johnson? I didn't realize how popular WSOF was because the ratings weren't, huge or anything, but all of a sudden, their 3 top stars come over to the UFC, and they're all getting bet on. The problem with Marlon Moraes, and nothing against his record in WSOF, he's never fought anyone of the level of caliber of Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, Uriah Faber, Hall of Famer, any of those guys that Asuncao has already beat. And, look, I watched the first Josh Hill fight. I love Marlon Moraes. Hey, I'm a fan if you're watching. I thought you lost. I thought Josh Hill beat him the first time they fought. I thought it was really clear. I thought Josh Hill really beat him the first time they fought, and that's Josh Hill. His last win, Marlon Moraes, in World Series of Fighting, the guy hurt his knee and just quit, and that goes down as a TKO injury. So some of these wins are a little, So, I mean, look, I think he's good. He's exciting to watch. He gets after it. He has really fast hands. But Rafael Asuncao, we know what we're getting here. A proven commodity, legitimate top 5, 135-pounder.
Yep, I'm loving Rafael Asuncao in here, and I'm looking at that as a part of this parlay where we just talked about. That would be a great parlay. The Rafael and Eric.
Yeah, totally.
And then the girls over.
There's
the 3 parlay right there.
Yeah,
that's good. I agree with you, Nick. I was just thinking about throwing those 2 in a little parlay myself.
Yeah,
I'm definitely taking both of them. Eric Silva, Rafael Asuncao. There's straight up some value here. I'm betting them. Matt's betting them. Nick's parlaying them, so you better believe there's some value.
Yeah, there's going to be some value there.
And moving on down the card, anyone else you really want to talk about? Yuri Alcantara against Brian Kelleher. No surprise there. Yuri Alcantara minus 320 favorite. against a guy who I believe this is his first UFC fight.
Yeah, and I bet this one, and I don't always recommend to people to lay a big price, but I laid, I ended up laying 550 out total on this fight, 100 on that total, 100 on a Sun Tzu to make 160, and I laid 310 to make 100 on Uri Alcantara. I think this is a complete mismatch. Alcantara 3-1 his last 4 in the UFC, 6-2 his last 8 in the UFC, and his only losses in that 6-2, Uriah Faber and Jimmy Rivera, who may end up being a future champion at that
Rivera's
division.
no joke.
Uriah Faber in the Hall of Fame. Alcantara is a legit.
And that fight with Faber, he was beating his ass for the first half of that fight.
I mean, Uri Alcantara is real. This is one of those fights where at first you go, why are they fighting? It was kind of like Glover Teixeira, Jared Cannonier.
Yeah.
You're like, why are these two fighting?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Lose.
This guy's not even a hot prospect. He's a 30-year-old, 30-plus, making your pro debut, and you weren't even good on the regional scene. Now you're suddenly going to come in and beat out a top, 6 or 7 bantamweight in the world. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The only thing I could think is that Uri Alcantara, the Brazilian, they want to get him a fight kind of in front of his hometown crowd, and they didn't really have any other big 35-pound fights available, and this is what he got.
And I think the UFC, by putting Yuri with this Brian Kelleher, was kind of doing the same thing by putting Eric Silva with the NC Medeiros. Only difference is Eric Silva's a slight underdog. Yeah. So if you're going to do anything with this Yuri Alcantara, Brian Kelleher fight, he's minus 320, so there may be some value working him in a parlay, but I definitely don't see how Yuri could lose this one.
No, I don't either. And look, this Kelleher isn't even a big puncher. He's a wrestler. He's kind of one of those wrestle grinders, and you're not going to go to the ground to beat Yuri Alcantara, one of the best submission artists in the UFC. And on the feet, Yuri's just going to pick him apart. I think this is a complete mismatch and a showcase fight for Yuri Alcantara to give him another big fight.
And there you go. You talked me into another one. That'll take a little value out of the parlay, but why not do a 4-teamer now?
Why
a 4-pick.
Yeah, throw this one in there.
Throw this one in with
if you got a nice 2-fight parlay, because that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, throwing Eric Silva, Rafael Assunção in a parlay, but just to get a little bit more payoff, just throw Yuri in there as well. There's my 3-fight parlay.
Throw Yuri in there and then do the girls over.
Girls over, and you're going to be counting some hundreds by the time the fights are over.
And we are hot. I mean, we have been picking them.
So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, those are the fights I really wanted to touch on. Is there any other just pieces of value jumping out at the from the sheet at you that you care to talk about, Matt?
No, my bets on the card are I bet $100 on a Sun Tzu at plus 160, $100 on Vitor, Nate Marquardt over 1.5 rounds, plus 170, 310 to win 100 on Yuri Alcantara and, to win the 100. And then I did a $40 parlay to win $1,250 with 4 underdogs, Max Holloway, Eric Silva, Rafael Assunção, and the last guy I threw in, I only mentioned it because we didn't talk about the fight, is Marco Beltran at plus 130 right now. And he's fighting another UFC newcomer with an impressive record that we haven't seen fight anybody. And I just thought it says on this thing it's like Figueroa, but they really call him Davison Alcantara, just like Uri Alcantara. Yeah. And look, his record's impressive, but he hasn't fought anybody yet. And Marco Beltran's been in there with some guys, and he can bang a little bit. So I thought just to have 4 underdogs in there, he was the one I included.
Nice.
And I noticed it's a 1.5. Is one of them a big puncher or something?
Well, Beltran's a banger. He's probably going to get finished or knock him out, is my guess. And, of course, a lot of these guys, you come in, and that's the thing about Alcantara in that fight. All ththese guys that come into the UFC 8-0, 7-0, 9-1, they all have 7 or 8 knockouts because they're fighting, massively overmatched opponents on a regional scene, and you don't always know how good they are, and that's the case again with that Alcantara and his record.
Right.
Because I think Marco Beltran's like 8-4. But he has like 7 fights in the UFC, and he's been in there with some tough guys, and he's banged out a couple guys in the UFC, so at least you know what you're getting.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we saw with Al Hassan last week. I didn't bet Akhmedov. I should have. I wish I did. There were so many big underdogs that got home, including your call of Uzdemir, which was a beautiful call, that one-punch KO. But once I saw those two go to the octagon, I went, holy shit, Al Hassan is a 155-pounder fighting at 170.
Yeah.
Had he have been in
huge.
UFC for a couple years, someone would have told him, son, you can't fight at 170 in the UFC. The size difference was, he looked like a 55. He looked like an average to small 55er.
Yeah.
So some of these guys, you just have no idea. You've never seen them. They fight in jungle fight the whole time, and
Which is another reason to watch weigh-ins. It may just help earn you some money.
That's right.
So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to weigh-ins. And like you said, Matt's point, Vitor Belfort, how is he going to look at weigh-ins?
Yep, we gotta take a good look at that because last fight in the UFC, he probably doesn't want to look bad, so he probably wants to look juiced.
All right, my personal parlay I'm going to share with you. I'm taking Eric Silva, of course, Rafael Assunção, and Yuri Alcantara, and I'm going to do another small one, $20 bet to win a crap load of money where I do that same parlay and I throw Carolina in at 3-1 dog.
it makes a huge difference. A 3-1.
I think
and a
you just
14er.
called the same
Yeah.
as I'm calling, so we're just doing the same thing.
Well, you're taking the over, right? I thought you were taking Carolina
I'm taking
over.
Carolina over.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas
But he's getting plus
doing
300.
it
You're doing minus
plus
300.
300. Yeah.
yeah. So
Oh, it's minus 3.
almost
Yeah,
the
his
same
parlay is going to explode. Yours is going to
Well, maybe I'll leave her off that one. I thought it was the other way around.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do that 1-3 team.
So the bottom
parlay
one
and-
is-
Well, we can't have plus 270 when
Another
neither one of
fourth
them's
one.
ever not gone the distance.
So the bottom one is for the
This is bottom's always under, top's always over.
over. Okay.
Yeah, so the over is minus 320.
That's about
and
the
look, it
same
very
thing.
well probably will get home still.
It's the same thing. It's guaranteed.
Guaranteed. So there you have it. Enjoy UFC 212. I hope, just like we will, you will make some money as well. And, man, can't wait to count them bills, Matt,
Yeah,
next
this is
week.
a good card. This
We're
is a
gonna-
really good card.
we're
Look,
gonna
3
celebrate.
underdogs last week of plus 300 or bigger.
That hit.
I didn't
Right?
pick any of them. In fact, I lost on one of them with Marcin Held, but
Yeah, you guys picked. You guys went against the Swede. I took the Swede.
No, I took Gustafson.
Oh, you did.
Oh, yeah.
You
that
took
was me.
Yeah, he's just heavily favored.
Yeah,
I
he
just
was
thought
just
I was hoping to get him at like minus 180 or something. not
Something
at
you can handle, right?
Yeah, 280. So,
Yeah.
but I had him picked to win. But there you have it. Good luck in betting these fights. UFC 212 for Matthew Holt and Nick Blomgren. I'm Stephan Bonnar. See you next week on the final round.